There's a wild thing in Shropshire. There's a Barry in the jungle and a Barry on the score sheet as Stockport and Wrexham do battle once more. Vale sail fourth, 5 clear in first, while Lee Bell's So Solid crew are shy low, sell high, flying into second. 60% of the weekend's EFL games were drawn. Not great for content, but football isn't a TV show. Never forget that. Welcome to the NTT20 Monday pod. Tons to talk about, and I'll do that with George Elek. For he's a jolly good fellow, he really loves the yellows. He's not as good as Tom Fellows. Happy birthday, George.
That's really good.
I'm not going to give away your age. What I will say
34
is that 1,790 players have played an EFL minute this season. You are older than 95% of them.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, it must be nice. I think I've said this to you before. We spend a lot of time together.
Yes.
And it must be quite nice for you to know that I will always be about 18 months older than you.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what happens.
Yep.
So you are always 18 months behind me.
It's reassuring.
In everything you do.
It's reassuring.
And the immaturity shows.
Reassuring. Stockport beat Wrexham 1-0. Louis Barry. Top goal scorer in League One now with 11. And about half of them just seem to be the exact same goal. And what I find confusing, George, is that it's the type of goal that's meant to be very hard to do time and time and time again. But Barry is scoring from between 18 and 25 yards from sort of central left areas into the far corner.
With his right foot.
About 1 in 4 games at the moment.
Is it sustainable? Maybe. I don't know. What is sustainable these days?
Ian Robin says yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the best of the lot because it's not him receiving the ball, defender backing off, and him kind of jockeying right and then smashing it top right. He receives the ball with his back to goal and has to run back towards his own goal and then spins and then hits it, which makes it a bit more unique than the other ones in the collection. Albeit, you have to wonder how Wrexham are not getting tight to him at that moment. They're basically just sitting off, which is what they do away from home. Like Wrexham are a team who, out of possession, especially on the road, are incredibly passive and are happy to sit in their low block. But when you've got someone in Louis Barry who, yes, this might be an XG shot of like 0.03, but Louis Barry has shown that he is one of those guys who is an XG buster when it comes to long shots, and he will score more long shots than most people if given the opportunity to do so. So it has to be one of the worst Saturdays in terms of League One action. But in that moment from Louis Barry, from a player who, I support a club in Oxford who are in the Championship, and he would be top of my shopping list in January in terms of players that we could go after. But given how his development at Stockport County has gone over a year and a half, I see no reason why Aston Villa would be in a hurry to take him out of League One. He is quite clearly too good for the level. It's not just his exploits in terms of his goal scoring as well. He is someone who, as a ball carrier, is consistently able to ensure that Stockport are normally the dominant force in games. Obviously, the Wycombe game a couple of weeks ago showed that isn't always the case. But he's just excellent. He's such a good player. And, as is always the case when players suffer serious injuries as well, it's great to see that what happened to him last season hasn't impacted his explosive power and his ability to score goals, because he is doing it consistently.
Yeah, and it's been a hell of a response from Stockport to that 5-0 midweek defeat to Wycombe, obviously beating Bolton 5-0 and then Wrexham here. I think it's worth pointing out with Stockport, clearly, we expected a lot from them this season. They are currently in 4th place after this win, but they have played 16 games, and most of the teams around them have played 15. Some, in the case of Mansfield and Birmingham, have only played 13. Wycombe, Huddersfield, Bolton have all played 14. So they are a little bit ahead in terms of games played, and they've played 9 of their league games at home already, with 7 away, whereas, for example, Wycombe have only played 6 games at home, and given that teams almost always pick up more points at home than they do away from home, that sort of skew is I think, quite relevant and worth looking at. When you see Stockport in 4th, there's probably a few more layers you can apply that mean they've still probably got quite a lot of work to do, or rather they need to maintain the last few weeks' level of form if they're to kind of keep challenging for the top 6 and potentially for top 2. I mean, Wrexham only had 1 shot in the first half. They had a little flurry in the last 20 minutes, a little bit of pressure, but kind of petered out. Lost this game with a bit of a whimper. And I mean, I wonder if you're surprised about that. I think I know the answer because we've been talking about Wrexham's weird Jekyll and Hyde home versus away personalities for a while now. They are almost as different as two teams in the pyramid in terms of their home performances, results, approach, and that away from home. And I find it hard to understand why Phil Parkinson and all his players feel the need to be so deferential away from home when they have such a strong squad.
I'd love to know how deliberate it is, because there's no question. I reckon if we had Phil Parkinson on the sofa next to us right now and asked him, he would claim that it wasn't deliberate and that it was just a product of playing away from home and at home. But you can't get away with how different both the results are, but also the manner of the performances. And the biggest concern for me is if you look at their away form so far this season, they've won 2 of their away games. Those came against Peterborough, who are currently in 12th, and Rotherham, who are currently in 17th. Both good results, to be fair, and especially Peterborough. Not many teams restrict Peterborough to limited chances and a clean sheet away from home. But they've lost when they played against... They've only played 2 sides currently in the top 10. Birmingham, they lost 3-1. Stockport, they lost 1-0. And if we look back at last season, Wrexham's away record was okay, but they generally beat teams towards the bottom end of the table.
In League 2, yeah.
Sorry, in League 2.
Yeah.
But if you take 1st to 13th last season in League 2, they only won 2 of their away games, away at Crewe and away at Crawley, losing 4 of them and drawing all of the others. And this to me kind of makes sense, where they have players who are good enough and they're good enough defensively that they come up against poorer teams and they let them have it. They're able to pick them off relatively easily. But as we saw against Birmingham, even though in the first half against Birmingham, the game live on Sky a couple of months ago, they went ahead early and Birmingham didn't create loads of opportunities in the first half. The pressure told, and eventually, because they said to this group of really talented, good players, you have the ball and we're going to sit off you. It meant that when eventually they were able to carve out the good opportunities needed in order to win the game, and that I think is going to be their undoing. Where again against Stockport here, yeah, it's one thing saying to a winger from a poorer side in the league, you have it and we'll let you shoot from 25 yards, but it's another thing to say it to Louis Barry, and I think that they're going to suffer from the same fate where. I anticipate, and it's something to probably track, that they're going to struggle to beat teams away from home who are better. Obviously they did that against Peterborough, and Peterborough have Kwame Poku, who they kept quiet for the most part. But over 2 seasons worth of kind of sample size, and especially when you consider last season, they beat Stockport at home, they beat Mansfield at home, they beat Doncaster at home, they beat Crawley at home, they beat Barrow at home, they beat Wimbledon at home, Walsall, Gillingham. They obviously have the tools in order to dominate and beat these teams at home, scoring loads of goals. So why the attacking output is so blunted is it's very interesting, and it kind of tallies with the Phil Parkinson that we knew before Wrexham, who was a manager who was, to his great benefit, someone who drilled defences to be very resolute, who didn't take too many risks. And the big surprise is that he's managed to create this team at home who are so free scoring and get the best out of attacking players, which was never really his strong point before taking the Wrexham job. But yeah, they have to find. I personally don't understand why they don't look to approach games in the same way. I just think back to that game in September last year when they went to Stockport and they lost 5-0. Was that the moment in Phil Parkinson's mind where he was like, never again. We're gonna just make sure we do not concede 5 goals like that on the road, and therefore we're gonna pick up points.
They've got the 7th highest non-penalty XG at home in League One and the 2nd lowest away from home, and it's very hard to understand how a team could be so different on that front, but interesting. This was, to be positive about Wrexham, they're 3rd in League One. It's quite remarkable, really, how much they and Stockport have moved up this pyramid together, 2 of the most upwardly mobile clubs in our part of the pyramid. Obviously, Ipswich also celebrated 2 promotions in quick succession, but in the 2021-22 season, Stockport came 1st and Wrexham 2nd in the National League. Stockport went up, Wrexham didn't. 22-23 season, Stockport were 4th in League One straight away, and Wrexham obviously won the National League. And then last season, Stockport 1st in League 2, Wrexham 2nd in League 2, and here they are 3rd and 4th in League 1 as well, and doing things incredibly impressively overall in order to move up the levels, which is, even with deep pockets, not every team moves up the pyramid to this extent. It is not easy to do. You still have to do the right things, and I think both of those clubs have done that. Then there were 4 draws in League One out of the 5 games. 3 of them were 0-0. Let's start with the 1-1 draw between Cambridge and Barnsley. The scoring all happened quite early here. Dan Lundulu shrugging off a Barnsley defender and scoring via a deflection to put Cambridge ahead. And then it was all about Stephen Humphreys. He of the quite high average goal quality.
Is anyone
discussion
making the
from
goal
last
quality
week.
data set?
Yeah, who's made a start on that data set?
Come on. We know some smart people watch this.
Yeah, let's do this. He carries it from inside the centre circle, just inside his own half. He is on the break following a Cambridge set piece that's broken down. He speeds past Liam Bennett, who I do not see as a slow fullback. And then after carrying the ball for so long, under control, at high speed, it's the finish, it's the technique, it's the pureness of the strike on his weaker foot, not slashing at it, not dragging it wide, as would be very easy from that position on the left-hand side of the box, getting a really good, powerful connection inside the near post. Absolutely loved it. Barnsley have been so good away from home this season. I thought they might go on to win this, and they had the biggest chance to do so through Keylor Dunn, who headed over with about 10 minutes to go. In the interest of noting some interesting bits and bobs on a week where there's slightly less match action, Barnsley's Kelechi Nwakali played his first significant league minutes here. He's a 26-year-old Nigerian midfielder who I can't help but notice won the 2015 Under-17s World Cup Golden Ball in front of Victor Osimhen.
Wow, that's cool.
Arsenal signed him around that time. He never played first-team football for them. Since then, he's played in the Netherlands, in Spain, in Portugal last season with Chaves, and now here he is at Barnsley. And I'm kind of interested to see what he's got to offer, because I know very little about him, but he stood out in 1 or 2 of the highlights that I watched today, and maybe Darryl Clark's been waiting for the right time in what is, a very impressive part of the pitch for them with Phillips and with Connell and with others of that nature. Exeter 0, Lincoln 0. Watched this one Saturday lunchtime. First half, not a lot happened. Whitworth did find the time to pull off another exceptional save from a free kick from out wide that went all the way through to him. Great reflexes after it missed everyone. And he kept his 9th clean sheet of the season. I think that's the most in League One, Exeter. In the second half, I think Lincoln were the better side. Arahan came off the bench and made a huge difference in midfield, getting on the ball, playing with confidence, playing forward through the lines. In particular, Jack Moylan benefited a lot from that, who again, he playing sort of just off the left between the lines in an attacking midfield role. He looked very industrious, very lively, but the execution was just a bit off for both teams, and Lincoln couldn't get anything super clear cut, and it was 0-0. There was a red card from Ryan Woods after he and Arahan had a really good long-running battle in that second half, and it reminded me that when we went to Lincoln Oxford at the back end of last season, Arahan is one of the great rattlers currently playing in the EFL. His ability to wind up his opponents, but also opposition fans, I think is possibly top 3, top 5 in the whole EFL right now. And it'd be good to hear who you think are among the EFL's greatest rattlers. Despite kind of a boring, a slightly boring game in terms of the 0-0, I think it's worth pointing out, given we've just talked about Wrexham and Stockport and what they've been able to do with quite deep pockets for the level, I really admire how Exeter and Lincoln operate as clubs. And I think if you look at Exeter, a lot of focus on the strength of their academy, the exports that they provided to the England national team, the Welsh national team in terms of Ampadu, to the Championship and to the Premier League as well. But also that their recruitment's been good, targeted over the last year or two. They don't have a big budget at this level. They've nailed the loan market this season in particular. Tristan Crammer is an absolutely magnificent human specimen and a great defender as well. Then there's Whitworth in goal, there's Yafeko, there's Kamari Doyle, all of them on first loans as well, which, as we often say, can be quite volatile in terms of being able to predict how much of an impact first loan players will have. They've absolutely nailed it on that front. And then, even players like Ryan Woods, Josh McGuinness, I'm not sure many other League One clubs would have gone for those players over the summer, but Exeter have got that nice blend of the young loanees, the senior pros like that maybe on their way down a little bit, people like Francis and Milenik Ali. Again, I'm not sure many other League One clubs would have signed these players. And so I think if you're showing that level of creativity and you're able to bed these players into a really strongly performing team, you should get a lot of credit for that.
I think there's a point with Exeter, and I totally agree that they deserve immense credit for it, where when circumstances mean that you have to be creative, it can lead to the best recruitment. I almost think it's when teams have resources in order to go and spend that it's easy to become lazy, where you can just basically buy a player who's just scored 15 goals in a season in League Two, and you're like, well, he's good. And there's no kind of, whereas Exeter, for many reasons, whether it's financial or geographical, have to be quite cute in the way they do things. And yeah, you're probably right that Woods and McGuinness are two players who, because they're on their way back down again, a lot of clubs would be put off, but Exeter can see the quality is there and have utilised both really well. So yeah, massive credit to them. And as you say, recruiting from non-league as well, it feels like they're a side who we can look at some teams and say that they're very good at recruiting from certain areas, where it feels like Exeter kind of get everything right. The loans are good, the players who've got a history higher up in the game is good. It's all impressive. The non-league recruitment's good. So very well done to the Exeter City recruitment team.
Yeah, and those who listen to the League One 124s will remember that I'm a big admirer of Lincoln City as well. I think in that show I said, if there's anyone listening to these looking for a League One team to follow just as a friendly neutral this season, take a look at Lincoln. Both in terms of the makeup of their squad, where a huge proportion of their key players are between the ages of basically 21 and 24, 25. They've been building that group of players in their squad for the last few years. They've sprinkled the experience of Derrickwa, of Conor McGrandles, and the big boys at the back, Jackson and O'Connor, of course, as well. But loads of good young players. And just the way that the club operates, I think, in particular when it comes to their communication with their fans, is something that I really respect. And it gets massive buy-in from the fans. And I think it's something that a lot of other people who run clubs in the EFL of a similar size could look to emulate. And it's not just about off the pitch. On the pitch, since Michael Skubala was appointed, you might remember there were some eyebrows raised when Mark Kennedy was sacked and Skubala appointed his first senior management job. Lincoln have picked up the most points in League One since that appointment. Now, clearly that doesn't include the teams that went up last season and the teams that came down, like Birmingham. They're not going to be getting the same amount of points in such a short period of time, but it's still a good stat to be at the top of, a good tree to be at the top of. Bristol Rovers drew 0-0 with Crawley. I'm a bit concerned about Bristol Rovers. Like in this game specifically, you're at home to a team in the bottom four. You really need to win. The vibe's not great. The results have been quite poor for a pretty extended period of time now. The underlying numbers don't show much solace there, or much reason to kind of much hope to cling on to, really, in terms of performances being better than the poor results. And then you have 9 of the first 10 shots of the game, and you think, yeah, okay, we're on top here. We've got to see this through and pick up 3 points here. Then you only have 1 of the next 13 shots in the game, which basically to me says you're getting worse throughout a game at home against a team in the bottom 4, and that for me that's a warning sign for sure. I do think it's worth pointing out that something I noticed researching the betting show last week is that Crawley's away XG numbers are really good, significantly better than their home XG numbers. They might be one of these teams that for whatever reason are just a bit more comfortable and a bit looser playing away from home. I'm not sure exactly what it would be, and results don't necessarily back it up. They haven't picked up many points away from home, but I do think the underlying numbers suggest that in quite a big way they're actually a pretty decent side away from home, and probably saw that in the second half here. They've created 8.5 expected goals away from home and only scored 3, so massively underperforming. But on Ben Griffiths' excellent data resource that I shared in the Research Bible, basically every metric suggests that they're quite good away from home, genuinely. So I think that's something to keep an eye on for Crawley. I would predict a few surprise results incoming for them. And then Blackpool 0, Northampton 0, one where Northampton probably had the better chances in the first half. Blackpool, much more opportunity in the second half. Bit of an injury crisis for them at the moment at the top of the pitch, with Carl Joseph and Jordan Rhodes both coming off injured. No sign of ex-Geesley or Ashley Fletcher in the squad. Ballard away with the under-20s. But as Albert Einstein once said, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. And that comes in the form of 17-year-old Terry Bondo.
Yeah.
Great name. Great young player who came on, almost scored and looked a real handful. George, since the last international break, since we did our State of the Nation pod, in League One, let's have a little look at the snapshot. Wickham, 5 wins out of 5. Barnsley and Stockport have both picked up 11 points in that time, albeit Stockport have played 7 games, Barnsley only 5. Then you've got Reading and Cambridge, who both picked up 10 in their last 5 games since that international break. Then Northampton showing improved form. Bolton are there with 9 points. Then you've got Birmingham and Huddersfield, who both picked up 8 points from their 4 games at 2 points per game. Wrexham and Lincoln and Exeter fill out the top half since the last international break. At the bottom, you've got Blackpool, quite alarmingly, with 2 points from 5 games and 12 goals conceded with only 4 scored, and that poor form continuing, failing to beat Northampton at home. You've got Wigan, somewhat concerning as well, 1 point from 4 in that time, and Shrewsbury Town at the bottom. No points from their 4 games, no goals scored, 7 goals conceded. But is there some blue and amber hope in the long-haired, wild thing, Gareth Ainsworth, the new Shrewsbury Town manager?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I think it's a roll of the dice that makes total sense. Like, I think if you are Shrewsbury, you need to do something that is gonna kind of grab the club and shake it. And no matter what happens with Gareth Ainsworth at Shrewsbury, he will shake it. Like, he will come in and he will change things, and he will behave in a way where he will be demanding that the players join him on this positive journey. And that's what he did at QPR. And from what it looks like, the players thought, I don't want to go on that journey with you, Gareth, I'm afraid. And it didn't work. But he tried. At Wickham, it felt like he got buy-in from everybody involved, and it took them from League Two into the Championship and back again. Obviously, the football isn't for everybody, but I think if you are a team trying to, if you're one of the lowest budget sides in League One, trying to stay up, I would say that adopting a fairly attritional brand of football, where you're going to be pretty cute with the way that you approach, the way you approach games, and you're going to try and concede very few goals and be physical and get any fine margin benefit that you can, is probably the way to go about it. Like, if you've got 2 teams at the moment in the relegation zone in League One. One's just appointed a manager in Shrewsbury. One's just is looking for one in Burton Albion. And if Burton Albion, as I imagine they will, continue to try and hire someone with a kind of developmental onus, playing football in a certain way, in a more positive, aesthetically pleasing way, then I would have no doubt that in the short term, Gareth Ainsworth would have a much better chance of succeeding with the sole aim of survival. My guess is also that Gareth Ainsworth has looked at this job because, frankly, with issues around the future ownership of Shrewsbury Town at the moment, it doesn't feel like a great place to go and work right now for an out-of-work manager. But I've got no doubt that Gareth Ainsworth has looked at Darrell Clarke and has seen massive parallels in both of them, where Clarke would no way have got the Barnsley job this time last year. He'd just left Port Vale in a pretty difficult position in League One. Obviously, Ainsworth left QPR in a pretty difficult position in the Championship, but it does feel like he's almost tarnished by his own style to an extent, where there are a lot of fans out there who would say no thank you to Gareth Ainsworth, regardless of the amazing job he did at Wickham, because of the style of play. And he's probably looked at Darrell Clarke, and he knows that if he can go to Shrewsbury, and if he treats this as a 9-month job, and if he can keep them up, and Darrell Clarke didn't even succeed in keeping Cheltenham up. He just came very close to doing so and won a lot of plaudits in the process. Basically, if Ainsworth can use this season as a proof of concept that his methods can still be effective at League One level, and he can turn Shrewsbury Town around and get them close to survival, then he knows that he will again become a valuable commodity, where suddenly his career, over 2 different spells at 2 different clubs, with one obvious disaster in the middle with QPR, but at a different level, will be seen as being a hireable commodity, and that's what he needs. And Shrewsbury Town, I'm sure, they will, whilst they'll feel aggrieved, like, they also need survival, so they would benefit out of that too. So,
yeah, questions of style must be a million miles away from the priority of anyone
that won't care,
either within the club.
But also,
I mentioned the stat when we talked about Hurst being sacked. They've scored 53 goals in 71 league games. They're not playing any football anyway.
But yeah, and the key thing I would always say with Wickham is that, yes, the abrasive style may not be the way that everyone wants their football to be played, that they go and watch, but he's got a pretty good record with attacking players. Gareth McCauley came to Wickham in what we thought was kind of the twilight of his career, and he's played for another 5 seasons. You look at Fred Onyedinma, who did brilliantly there early on in his career. Like, he is someone who, yeah, they may not play through the thirds, but when they get into the final third, attacking players are given freedom with which to flourish. Anis Mehmeti, another one. So, it's not all long ball, win the first ball, and smash people, but it is attritional, and that is what Shrewsbury are going to get. But I think that is suited to the predicament that they're in right now. So, we always say, or when we talk about managerial appointments, do I think Shrewsbury Town have a better chance of survival now than I did a week ago without a game being played because Gareth Ainsworth is now their manager? Yeah, for sure. But we also know that with him, if he doesn't get buy-in, and is, you and I have been lucky enough to share a beer or two with him, and he is, for as far as we can tell, a lovely man and someone who's incredibly enthusiastic, like unbelievably enthusiastic about his job. If the Shrewsbury players and fans buy into what Ainsworth is selling, which is what happened at Wickham, then we know that there is a recipe there for success.
I think it was Colin Murray who once used the phrase, "You are some man for one man." I think he was talking to or describing Clinton Morrison, actually. And that phrase has always really stuck with me, and it massively applies to Gareth Ainsworth. Anyone that's ever spent any time in his company knows he is some man for one man, and he's got a hell of a job on his hands with Shrews, who are 6 points from safety, not helped by the fact that my take, certainly on the bottom of League One, is that there just aren't very many relegation level teams, which makes it even harder for a team that has quite a lot of ground to make up that ground. At the moment, the 4 teams above the relegation zone are Leyton Orient, Wigan, Blackpool and Rotherham. That's an Orient team who I'm convinced are nowhere near 20th in terms of kind of performance level and how they generally approach things. That's a Wigan team that I am pretty concerned about. It's a Blackpool side in a bit of a tailspin, and a Rotherham side under Steve Evans who are massively underperforming expectations, but still not to the extent that I'd be hugely concerned about relegation for them. And then you've got the sort of Northampton and Stevenage, who are doing fairly well, I would suggest, on their budgets this season. And again, certainly playing with a level of competitiveness that doesn't scream sliding down towards relegation, although Stevenage's recent form is really poor. And then a Bristol Rovers side that, as I mentioned, I am, again, pretty concerned about. I wouldn't be surprised if they have to make a change of manager at some point, Rovers, because I really am very underwhelmed by their general level of performance. I don't expect them to get any higher than 14th if they keep playing in this way. But I guess that just paints the picture that for Shrews, even if he goes on a magnificent run, I think it's really difficult for any of those teams to realistically climb out of the relegation zone this season compared to maybe previous seasons. So an interesting one. Only 5 League One games, 4 of them draws. It's the 3rd time this season an international break has seen a lot of postponements in League One. There's actually the fewest so far this season in this break, but every time we've had more than half of the League One slate sort of wiped away by international postponements. It prompted an excellent piece from Hugh Davis on NTT20.com, kind of investigating the situation, laying out the regulations around it, what clubs are able to do to request a postponement, how that generally works, and just looking at certain scenarios that really don't seem ideal. I think it's tough for the EFL. You have to have rules in place that allow, you either blanket stop all games in the international break in League One, where half of the league would go, hold on, I want to play these games on a Saturday. We want to have home games on a Saturday. We don't have 3 international players. And we don't want to have 3 international players. We like the players that we do have. So why should we have to rearrange all of our games to wedge them in midweeks later on in the season? But increasingly there are too many teams, it seems, who are wanting to request postponements, and it gets this situation, as I alluded to earlier, where Stockport have played 16, some teams have played only 30, and it's just not a great imbalance to have, I don't think. This weekend we had Exeter unable to call off their game despite having 3 international call-ups because Kamari Doyle was drafted in late. He was a replacement for an under-20s player that had been injured, so they missed the cut-off for requesting the postponement. And they were missing 3 seriously key players in Niskanen, McGuinness and Doyle. Charlton did have their match this weekend postponed. Their 3 international call-ups were Karoy Anderson, who has started a lot of their recent games with Jamaica, Kaheem Dixon, also with Jamaica, who's made one league appearance this season as a stoppage time substitute. And Thierry Small, who hasn't started a league game in 2 months. Neither Anderson or Dixon played in Jamaica's first game. Dixon was sent home because he lost his passport. Small came off the bench for the under-20s for like 10 minutes. And it just happens that Charlton have a bit of an injury crisis outside of the internationals at the moment. You know, they were missing 7 players last weekend, and maybe didn't fancy playing a posh team that are kind of in good nick.
Dixon lost his passport.
That's what they're saying. He's very young. Maybe hasn't done a lot of international travel.
You ever lost your passport?
Not in those sort of circumstances. I mean, I lose my passport every time I'm looking for my passport. I've lost my passport and then I find it.
When I was 24, I went travelling around America for 2.5 weeks, and it was before I could drive, and I didn't have a provisional, and I realised it the day before. And obviously you need ID everywhere in America. So I travelled around America for 2.5 weeks, going out most evenings with my current passport in my pocket, which in hindsight is probably one of the stupidest things I've ever done. Because if I'd left that in a bar, how am I getting home?
What a story that would have been. What was the best night out you had? What was the night out that would have most likely have finished with you leaving your passport?
I think probably our first night in New Orleans, I would say. It was good. Yeah. Fun times. Or maybe we had one day, Champions League final day, on Rainy Street in Austin. It was pretty special because Champions League final kicked off at about 11 a.m. Texan time. So that was good.
Good time to mention NTT20.com, which is an incredible resource for written EFL content, even if we do say so ourselves. Hugh's piece is brilliant. There's loads on there every week. Weekend notes written by Sam Parry and Hugh as well, with George and I and Matt Watts contributing too. Is a real delight every Monday morning. And obviously Dear Ali and George as well, our subscriber-only podcast on Fridays, is having a fantastic season as well. But let's talk about League Two. Port Vale, they left it late, but they beat Morecambe on Saturday. This game saw a very impressive, very passionate and vocal fan protest from the Morecambe fans against the current ownership of the club. Get out of our club was the chant. 26 months since the club was put up for sale. Still no light at the end of the tunnel. Vale fans, impressively as well, lending their support, joining in with the chant, amending it to be get out of their club. Really, really good to see opposition fans coming in support of a fan base that are trying to make it clear what needs to happen. Now, I should bring up the fact that in an ITV piece that was done around this, they said that the owner spoke to them, and I quote the ITV piece, "In a lengthy conversation, he didn't want to be interviewed, but was happy to reveal he'd agreed terms with a potential buyer soon after talks began in July. The UK-based buyer wishes to remain anonymous while they work closely with the EFL to complete the deal. Whittingham reiterated his desire to sell and said, while there's a willing on all sides to get a deal done, just like fans, there's frustration at the time it's taking." We're at that point with this where we need actions rather than words like that. Certainly the fans do, so they will continue to keep the pressure on, and they're right to do so. I was again heartened to see the club's co-chairman Rod Taylor saying, and quoted in the piece as saying, I'm as confident now as I have been over the last 2.5 years. I think it's the nearest we've been to a deal. We want to be able to expand on the playing squad in January, so new funds coming in will be absolutely crucial to that. So some good news, or rather some positive noises and quotes, and we just really hope that that new potential buyer and its talks with the EFL can be completed soon, and Morecambe can move forward. They almost went ahead. Tollett and Dackers kind of getting in each other's way at the back stick.
Dackers, that's really poor.
Yeah. The problem is, when you play against Vale at the moment, George, if you've got chances to get ahead, you need to get ahead. Otherwise, they'll get ahead.
Yeah, they are a good team, and they have many different ways to win games. They're pretty dangerous from open play, with Stockley obviously being the target for the most part. Curtis offering some real threat off the left-hand side, but they're also a very good set-piece team, and that's where the goal came from, with Ethan Chislett. Not a player you'd necessarily expect to score from a corner, but he capitalised from a flick on from Stockley and tapped home. Mad celebration. You know, I can understand, you score a goal in the 83rd minute to win again 1-0. It's going to be exciting. shirt off, and then he kicks the corner flag out of the ground.
Yeah.
So I thought like elation and then anger. What's happened? Maybe 2 yellow card offences as well. But
it just felt like passion.
Yeah.
Promotion.
I guess maybe
passion.
You're there. You've taken a shirt off, so you know the yellow's coming. You see a corner flag, you're like, I want to kick it.
Yeah. Is kicking the corner flag a yellow card offence? I might need to check the rules of the game.
Bringing the game into disrepute, I would say.
Okay.
But no, I mean
I'm pretty sure that's an off-field charge you've just quoted there.
Yeah, but he's the corner flag is just about the pitch.
Yeah. Okay. Nice.
But yeah, I mean Morecambe will feel aggrieved that they weren't able to get ahead through that Daka's chance early on. But Port Vale dominated the game with a better side throughout. But just frustrating for Morecambe that they came so close to holding the league leaders and kind of the runaway league leaders now, albeit Walsall's games in hand maybe, and Wimbledon's to an extent having an impact in terms of that 5-point gap between them and Crewe in second. But they are, it kind of feels like they're turning the screw on League Two, and it's only November.
Weird one.
Yeah.
Darren Moore.
Yes.
Derek Adams. If you had to guess their ages. Darren Moore, Port Vale manager. Derek Adams, Morecambe manager.
I'd say Darren Moore is 43.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say Derek Adams is 52.
You are 7 and 3 years away.
Good.
Darren Moore's 50. Derek Adams is 49.
Wow.
You thought Adams was
So
9 years older.
So what's annoying
and
there
he's actually a year younger.
is that you saying that, I thought your whole thing was going to be like, I can't believe that. I thought you thought it was going to be that way, so I tried to reverse it, and I was wrong.
No, I'd have easily thought Adams was older than Moore.
All right, good. Okay.
And he isn't.
No.
He's younger.
I think part of this is that Darren Moore continued playing quite late into his 30s, which is why our perception is like, well, he only retired like 10 years ago, so how old can he be?
Perception's crazy, isn't it, man?
Yes.
Perception versus
9/10
reality.
of the law.
Hit the FOTMob corner button. I want to ask you about Port Vale. They are 5 points clear now at the top of League Two. What are the key factors behind their strong start to the season?
They're really good. I mean, like,
is that a FOTMob metric?
As ridiculous as that sounds, what kind of?
Good per 90.
Where when we do FOTMob corner, you kind of look through all the different FOTMob categories of like stats categories in order to see like where are they excelling. And Port Vale are just across the board, just high in every table. To make it very base, they are 5th for goals per 90 and 6th for goals conceded per 90. That combination of being pretty good going forward and pretty solid at the back is going to be a recipe for success. However, is it sustainable? Are they a team who are going to continue to do this? Yeah, I mean, 5th for goals per 90, 1.5 goals per 90. 5th for expected goals, 23.5. So they're exactly where you expect them to be in terms of expected goals. And then 4th for expected goals against, or 21st, the way the FOTMob set it out, 13.8 expected goals against. So they are tracking basically exactly where you'd expect them to be, both in terms of their goals and expected goals, which is a very, very good sign. Then you look at the way that they use the ball, and they're a team who, because they've got Stockley playing as a striker who, as a target man, has been recruited to play in the Championship. I don't think age is really an issue for Jaden Stockley. He's not particularly mobile. It doesn't really matter that he's a bit older. His physical capabilities mean that he is as dominant a target man at League Two as you're probably going to get. And this means that they, despite having the 5th most accurate passes per game, which is normally a sign that a team like to get it down and play when you consider that not counting MK Dons are 1st and 2nd. But then they're also 3rd for the most accurate long balls per game. So not only are they the team with the 5th most passes full stop, but also the 3rd most long balls, which shows how important it can be to have a target man or a focal point like Stockley to enable you to play the hybrid system that we talk about. It means they're able to get crosses in consistently, as is seen by the fact that they're also 2nd for accurate crosses per game. Like, it's telling that the top 3, no other team are replicating their position at the top end of these tables, right? So not counting MK Dons 1st and 2nd for accurate passes, Chesterfield and Salford 1st and 2nd for accurate long balls, AFC Wimbledon and Doncaster 1st and 3rd for accurate crosses per game. Port Vale are the only one to a ranking high in all of them, and it makes them a threat so consistently in different ways from both open play and set pieces. Similarly, if you're looking at kind of duels and defensive actions, they rank 4th for interceptions, 8th for successful tackles, 8th for clearances per game. Now, I would never really look at stats like clearances because what does it really tell you? But again, the fact they rank high in everything tells you or suggests to me that there's basically no weakness to their game. There isn't necessarily a kind of plan A and that's it. They're able to adapt and play the best style of football in order to combat whatever threat they face and ensure that they're effective from an attacking standpoint. And then maybe most importantly or most interestingly for me, are they lacking that 20 goal a season striker? Yeah, I think so. Like Jaden Stockley and Ethan Chislett are currently topping their goal scoring charts on 4 and 4. Stockley, I think, having been prolific previously, I don't think this Port Vale side are necessarily ones who are going to be a team that rack up loads of high scores in order to do that. But they've got 12 different goal scorers this season. So already, we're only in mid-November, and of those, 8 have scored 2 or more goals. So you've got attacking threat from so many different areas, whether it's Hackford, Garrity from midfield, Tolai, who's a player that I really like. They've got it all there. So my kind of takeaway from doing this little deep dive on Football Corner into Port Vale is that they're not a Notts County who are going to praise for their incredible passing football. They're not a long ball team who we can look at and say, maybe someone like AFC Wimbledon who we can credit for their incredible defence and ability to create chances from sending it long fairly often. They're just a side who, if you shut down one threat, they'll find another way to beat you. If you think you found one way to attack against them, they'll probably combat it. And probably what we should say is that Darren Moore, that's going to be the product of very, very good coaching. So we've got to give the manager his due credit, especially after he came in from massive criticism after a really poor start to the season. Like, who would have thought after those poor performances in the infancy of the campaign that we'd be sitting here mid-November and they'd have a 5-point cushion second in the league?
Yeah, the way that the squad's been built and the way that Moore is using it also gives me cause for optimism if it comes to thinking about how sustainable this is, whether they can stay at the top or at the very least in the top 3 of League Two until the end of the season and win promotion. I mean, you've got this core of Connor Ripley, Ben Hennigan, Connor Hall, Connor Grant, Crowsdale in midfield and Stockley up front. 6 players who are all between 29 and 31. So by no means over the hill, but all experienced campaigners, many of whom have played at a higher level. Very, very comfortable when it comes to what is needed, both sort of mentally and physically, to cope with a pretty long EFL season. And Stockley, I'm glad you brought up because, only 4 goals. If you look at the top scorers of the teams at the top of League Two, Port Vale stand out, as you say, for not having someone that is scoring a lot of goals. Crewe have Shiloh Tracy on 5. Donny have Luke Molyneux on 6. Walsall have Nathan Lowe. MK have Gilby. Notts have Alassana Jatta all on 7. Bradford have Cook on 9. But Stockley does so much. And the stats really reflect that when it comes to being a target man. His aerial duel percentage is 58.1%, right up there for League Two strikers. His dual win percentage, 55.1%, very much in line with that. He wins a lot of fouls as well, 2.13, which again, if you've got good delivery from set pieces, which they do, and you've got targets from set pieces, which they do, it's really helpful to have a player at the top of the pitch who's winning you free kicks in good positions. And I like that you touched on the mixed style. They can play through the thirds. They can get progression from wide areas. That the wing-back cover's been really impressive on loan from Everton. But also they can just hit Stockley and they do get bodies around him, whether it's, starting on the weekend. You've got Patton and Curtis closest to Stockley. You've got Chislett basically playing in a central midfield role, much deeper, more defensive-looking role on paper than we'll have seen him play before, but looked very comfortable in that. But Stockley's the fulcrum for all of this attacking talent in the squad. All of them kind of contributing in bursts and allowing this team to be a constant threat all the way to the end of games. If you look at FOTMob's player individual stats for League Two, they do XG plus XA per 90, so a mixture of goal threat and creative threat. They have 6 players in the top 35 for that combined stat. Rico Richards is 9th on reduced minutes, another loanee. Jaden Stockley 11th, Antoine Hackford 17th, Ethan Chislett 26th, Laurent Talage 33rd, and Benicio Baker-Boite 35th. And I think with Baker-Boite and with Richards and with Hackford, you're seeing that their approach to the loan market is to get really skillful, pacey, young, dynamic attacking players and don't ask them too much. Don't ask them to be your starters and to rely on them for output, week in, week out, Saturday, Tuesday on their first loans. That's going to be difficult for young players to do. So instead, they're currently being used off the bench, those three. And it's no surprise that in terms of dribbles per game for Port Vale, Baker Boyti, Richards, Hackford, all completing more than one dribble per game. Cover as well, another one of the loanees. These are the guys that maybe don't have the experience to be relied upon consistently, but they do have pace and technical ability, perfect for substitute appearances. They're allowing Port Vale to really keep the pressure on and get stronger throughout games. So for Moore, it's a really impressive job. He's basically, he's got a lot of responsibility for squad building as well after they lost their director of football. And he's built a big squad, a squad with a lot of quality, with peak age players and with some talented loanees as well. And he's created a really strong all-round team. And Port Vale 5 points clear at the top of League Two. That's been FOTMob Corner for this week. FOTMob has XG stats and so many other metrics for League Two, League One and the Championship and so many leagues across the world, as well as being the best scores app available. So download FOTMob today using the link in the show notes. Crewe Alexandra, second in League Two, having beaten Notts County by 2-0. A lot of noise in the build-up to this one about Notts County absences. They didn't have 3 international call-ups, so they couldn't request a postponement, but they did have Alassane Jatta, their top goal scorer, called up. So he was missing on top of the absent injured players, Dan Crowley, Jody Jones. McGoldrick was only fit enough for the bench here, came on at half-time. Robertson and Edwards, midfielders, missing. But Crewe always seem to have some fairly damaging absences of their own. At the moment, it's Powell in midfield. It's Hemmings and Lancaster at the top of the pitch. It's Knight LaBelle, who's been brilliant on loan from Bristol City. They were all missing as well. So in that context, George, it's fair to say both teams missing players. One team coping much better with that scenario.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's important to note. And as you say, maybe with Crewe, we're kind of immune to it because they seem to have fairly consistent injury issues, but no less restrictive, or should be restrictive to them, but they're still able to churn out results. I'm really impressed with them at the moment. It feels like, after, similar to Port Vale, a disappointing start to the season, Lee Bell has managed to do what most managers try, where he tightened things up very quickly, and slowly they've added a real attacking threat whilst not losing anything in terms of their defensive shape. And they don't concede many opportunities, or at least not many good opportunities, with Notts County having very few chances in the first half, Cerullo going close with one very good shot. The first goal from Charlotte Tracy is so great, where his starting position, he is basically defending the back post from a corner, and the corner comes all the way through, and he just starts sprinting from basically the goal line and picks up the ball on the left-hand side. And his sheer pace to get to the ball first, but also to then get in front of the defender. You see the covering defender coming over, and you think he's going to have to move it wide, but instead he keeps going towards goal, puts it through the keeper's legs. When you see that kind of display, and we've seen it a couple of times from him this season. He's just, in terms of having a player that can expose space on the break, he's someone that can do it fairly consistently. And adding goals to that as well.
Finishing's been good, hasn't it?
Much better. I mean, this one wasn't the most clinical finish,
True,
but even so, he managed to. I'm not surprised. He just had to do the 100 metres in about 12 seconds to get there.
Well, it's funny you bring that up. I took the time to do some work on this. Yeah.
Amazing.
I didn't just time it. There's a bit of extras here as well. So I started timing when he crossed the 6-yard box. Right. So he'd already, as you say, he'd basically run from the post. Yeah. So he'd had 6 yards to kind of get off the mark, right? I hit it from when he left the 6-yard box. Now, that's the pitch at Crewe is 112 yards long, according to Wikipedia. Great resource. If we take off the 6 yards that he started on, and I reckon he took the shot from 14 yards. So 112 yards minus 20 yards is 92 yards, which is 84 metres. And he ran that in 9.97 seconds. While dribbling a football, shaking off a defender, and finishing
Didn't
to
shake
score.
him off, though, because he just burnt him.
He's having a wonderful time. I thought, far be it from me to question team selection and team shape, but well, actually it kind of is my job, partly. I was surprised that Stuart Maynard switched shape here. Notts played a back four, but the fullbacks were Macari and Bordeaux, who are normally the outside centre-backs. And the wingers were Cerullo and I think Sam Austin. Cerullo, more of a wing-back than a winger. and Austin a real utility player who fulfills every kind of role quite well, but is just not a particularly dangerous wide player, I wouldn't say. I don't really know why he did that. Looking at the players available and understanding that there's plenty of players missing, I still think he had the personnel to play their normal style and their normal system. Austin can play centrally in one of the central defensive or attacking midfield roles. They had Kellen Gordon on the bench, who ended up coming on at half-time when he changed the shape back to the normal shape. Gordon, I guess, could and should have started maybe at wing-back with Cerula. I don't know why they changed the shape, but given the absences they already had, I think it made them look quite incoherent. They looked a bit off it out of possession. They looked a bit off it in possession because the normal patterns, weren't quite there. They looked a lot better after they switched at half-time. The problem was, just as they were putting quite a lot of pressure on Crewe won a penalty that's just never a pen.
No.
I mean, Bogle
definitely not
chops just into the defender's body. There's no trip. There's no particular pull. Bogle just chops into him, finds himself blocked off because the defender tackles it, and then the ref gives a pen. And I'd be feeling pretty hard done by if I was Notts County, particularly because Ryan Cooney was gleeful after sticking away the penalty, celebrating in front of the goalkeeper Alex Bass, which led to David McGoldrick getting upset, which led to Zach Williams running in and basically shoulder charging McGoldrick, which then made him even more upset for Didsey. And then the Crewe players trotting over to the corner. Real good scenes. This was kind of, Port Vale's limbs was away limbs in the corner, Chislett top off. It's the sort of thing that gives you that special feeling amongst the club and the travelling fans. This was kind of that, but at home. Yeah. And that is equally powerful when you've got this connection between the players and the fans. It's what Crewe seem to have at the moment.
Yes, it is. And, they enjoyed an incredible ride last season to Wembley. And, despite the fact the season didn't start great, I do think we've spoken about it before. Teams losing finalists at Wembley often kind of build on that and go again and kind of learn from the experience a little bit. And it feels like they're doing that. Crewe have to be taken seriously now. I questioned them a lot last season because the underlying numbers weren't great, and the underlying numbers still aren't great. But when you've been doing, the body of work now is over 50 games where they've been a really good League Two side, despite posting not great numbers. And this season, that's mainly due to the attacking output, where the defensive stuff is fine, being very, very clinical. But, Lee Bell, sometimes you have to hold your hand up and say there's stuff going on here that, XG doesn't get. And I think that's the case with Crewe. Another comment on the crowd, though. One of the most incredible noises I've ever heard made. Late on in the game, Chris Long came off the bench and was immediately red carded for a horrible studs up tackle. And normally when it's a home player sent off for a nasty tackle, there's muted reaction.
Yeah.
If it's the away player, there's uproar. With this, because the studs went towards the nether regions, I think, and it was also just the impact was pretty obvious, you just heard the whole home crowd go, which didn't do him any favours, I don't think. But no arguments surely about the red card.
Yeah, got to be excited about Crewe, and got to be excited that next Monday night, Port Vale against Crewe, first v second, bit of local rivalry, live on Sky. Annoying that we won't be able to cover it on next week's Monday pod, but still very excited to be able to watch that. Next Monday night should be a fantastic atmosphere and a pretty good game based on the two teams that we've just bigged up over the last 10-15 minutes or so. We could probably do the same about this MK Dons side, George, under Scott Lindsay, who have won 5 in a row now, have jumped up from 19th when he was appointed to cosily inside the playoff places, and if anything, looking upwards. They're on 27 points in 5th, 1 point off Donny and Crewe, who are in 3rd and 2nd. And the last 3 wins have all come from behind. And it feels a bit like Scott Lindsay's just kind of doing it again. And by doing it again, I mean creating a team that are full of vibes, who are not particularly interested or good at defending, but who score enough goals that somehow it doesn't matter quite so much. And I think there's probably something in what he seems to be able to do as a leader, like empowering players to play in a certain way, empowering them to not put their heads down when they're behind, because for the 3rd game in a row they've come from behind and won. I've got to talk about Cheltenham's corner routine, because this is insane, right? Set pieces and the modern game, marginal gains, dedicated set piece coaches, really like detailed routines, and it's a huge part of football. And corner routines, George, are engineered to get a good shot at goal.
Yeah.
Cheltenham have one, which is to play the ball back to Luke Young, 35 yards out, and Luke Young takes a shot from 35 yards out, with basically every other player on the pitch between the ball and the goal.
Yeah.
And he has scored 3 times from it in
Insane.
15 games.
And this
season.
one, does it get a nick?
No, he's just absolute Diego Forlan with the Jabulani.
It's just a wobble.
Swazball.
Diego Forlan from the baseline.
Like, I just can't. It's so funny to me. So this came to my attention when they played Bradford in a midweek, and their goal was a corner with everyone in the box, and on the camera angle, it gets played out to the halfway line, and you're like, what are they doing?
Yeah.
And Young takes a shot, and it goes through bodies, and it goes in. You think, that is quite funny, to be fair. And then I saw it again when I was watching the highlights back, and I was like, hold on, this can't be the same team and the same player doing the same thing.
It is, yeah.
And then I realised, looking at his FOTMob shot map, that he did it against Grimsby as well, albeit that one was a terrible, like, quadruple deflected one. I just find it so funny.
But do you not think, if I'm the MK Dons analyst going into this game, I'm saying, like, that's fine. Like, almost of anything, I'd like point it out. Young's free.
Yeah.
Why don't you let him shoot?
The only person you have to talk to is the keeper. Be like, mate, at some point they're going to put it back to this bloke 30 yards out. He's going to shoot. Just save it. Like, it shouldn't be that difficult.
Do you think because it's working now, this will be the equivalent of Ronaldo taking free kicks, where in like 4 years we'll be like, yeah, they're still doing it. They haven't scored for 3.5 years.
The commentator on the extended highlights said, nobody was picking up Luke Young. I'm like, yeah, no one's ever picked up anyone 45 yards outside of goal from a corner.
Yeah.
Like, you're not meant to. They've basically broken football. Young put in a brilliant ball for their second goal as well, from a set piece into Bradbury across for Miller for 2-0. But MK coming roaring back once again.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny you talk about Scott Lindsay's doing it again, and there are kind of elements of this that are quite similar to Crawley, where again we talk a second ago about managers who break XG. Like MK Dons, since beating Harrogate 5-1, have scored a 5-1-0, 3-2, 3-3-3, but they're not posting those kind of numbers or anything close to them. Like here against Cheltenham, they only had 7 shots in the whole game, totaling 1.4 expected goals, but are being clinical in doing so. My favourite goal here by miles was Scott Hogan actually made 2 of them, and we spoke about Scott Hogan, and we laughed when he scored his first goal, being like, "Have you ever seen Scott Hogan like dribble before?" Well, he's doing it more.
Like, dribbling boy.
The first one was down the right hand side. He squares it to Gilby. Gilby probably in the position you'd expect Hogan to be in. Hogan having already had a goal disallowed previously too.
It's like the kid at school who never says a word in classes or in the playground, and then turns out he's got the voice of an angel.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And where's that come from?
But then
hiding your light under a bushel.
The
Scott
second
Hogan
goal was the best, where it starts with this just incredible flick on from Ellis Harrison, where he like has to contort his head into such a weird way, but just about gets in front of it from the defender and puts into Hogan's path. Hogan runs down the left hand channel. You expect it's Scott Hogan, he's going to shoot. Draws the keeper out and just plays this really nice little dinked left-footed ball into Harrison, who then outside of the boot taps it home. Like, what a front two there, looking like with Gilby in behind. But it kind of just reminds me, like, you watched the Crawley highlights last season, and you'd be like, wow, look at these goals. And you look at the actual game, you'd be like, oh, those are their only chances, and they just tuck them all away. It's similar at the moment with MK. But that's not, the results are now coming in. The quality they've got in terms of individuals within their side is patently obvious. So, yeah, let's enjoy it. And I'm not going to be too concerned about any underlying number stuff with them. I think they're a team who, have to be now be considered, as they were before a ball was kicked, as one of the best teams in the league.
My campaign last Monday to get Big Loz Maguire credited with MJ Williams' goal last week, which was smashed in off Maguire's face while he was lying on the floor, fell on deaf ears, sadly. The influence of this podcast is still not as strong as I would like when it comes to the dubious goals panel. But he got the winner here and showed like quite impressive feet in what looked like a really clumsy goal.
It was a really weird goal.
Where I thought he'd like almost tackled it in.
Yeah.
But then like the ball falls inside the box, a lot of bodies around him, like 2 or 3 defenders on him, and he manages to like roll it with his left foot into his right foot's path, and then sort of club it in with his weaker right foot. Very impressive. Well done, Loz Maguire. 5 wins in a row for MK. Scott Lindsay at it again. And then up on the peninsula, Inverness, Barrow Inverness, Wimbledon, left with 3 points, 3 goals, a 3-1 win, which I thought was a pretty impressive result. They were gifted the first goal.
Just ridiculous game to, just for context sake, for those who don't listen on Thursdays, I put up BTTS no in this game, so not both teams to score, and basically being like, these are two of the most solid defensive sides in the country, and both of them just make completely uncharacteristic defensive errors to make it 1-1 fairly early on. And you're like, fair play.
Yeah, that was tough. Canavan and Farman. I spent like quite a large period of the last 2 months like bemoaning Barrow's bad luck that after such a good start to the season, 2 of their senior players, the goalkeeper, the centre-back, have been injured. Farman and Canavan, how good they are. They'll be better when they come back. Well, gifted a goal to Wimbledon. And then Goodman, the Wimbledon goalkeeper, kind of did the same to Dallas, albeit I think that would be taking away from, Dallas still had to take a good touch with a ball that had been thumped at him from 30, 40 yards away, then get up to speed to get to the ball first and then finish past Goodman. And then there's a moment like this sort of game, classic game between fairly well-matched teams, 60, 65, 70 minutes where you wonder if they'll just kind of maybe take the point or what we have we hold. One in the bush is worth 2 in the hand.
Having to hold?
Yeah, exactly. Until death do us part.
Yeah.
But
you may not kiss the bride.
Johnny Jackson said, nah. He said, no, thank you. He said, I would not like to kiss the bride until we've left the peninsula with all 3 points. And so what did he do? Aggressive substitutions. Ogundere came on for Harbottle. Nominally, it was like for like the right-sided centre-back in the 3, but Ogundere is much more... He's got a bit more legs about him. He can get forward and deliver from deep a little bit better than Harbottle. The big change was James Ball, central midfielder, off, and Kelly, the striker, on. So he left on Pigott, he left on Stevens, and he added Kelly to the ranks. And that was, I think, just a bit of a statement, really. Statement substitution. Wimbledon then scored 2 goals in quick succession to win the game 3-1, both of them from Matty Stevens. So I liked the intent from Jackson and Wimbledon. They got the rewards. Stevens with a quick double, one really nice take, and then one tap in after good work from Neufville. Stevens is on 7 now, so he's only 1 back from Cheek, 2 back from Cook. He's only scored in 4 of 13 appearances, but with a hat-trick and a double in there, he's up on 7. And I think shout out Josh Neufville as well. So much better this season. Really established himself as one of the sort of premier attacking wing-backs in League 2. He's creating the most chances from open play for this Wimbledon side. He's really hard to stop once he gets going. And he's one of those players where when he's not in rhythm and on form, he's really tough to watch. His dribbling style is quite awkward. He often dribbles the ball out of play and his crossing can be pretty hit and miss. But instead of that, at the moment, when he's at his best and he's in rhythm and got confidence, it all looks great, really hard to stop. And he's getting assists, he's setting up chances. Really poor form for Barrow recently. They've dropped right down to mid-table. No clean sheet in 9 and only 17 goals in 16 games all season. So goal scoring is still an issue for them as it has been for quite some time now. Harrogate 2, Chesterfield 1. George, this Harrogate side have got this slightly strange personality, don't they? Where they've beaten Doncaster, Bradford, Chesterfield, Wrexham in the Cup, and very few other teams.
It's so weird. And again, could be a bit of a George Elek curse on this one after the betting show. But it's I think I even called it. I was like, whenever I bet against Harrogate, they always win. And they won. This was... I've been slight concerns for Chesterfield, I guess, after they were kind of the side early on in the campaign where the results weren't great. You look at the performances, you look at the numbers, and you'd be like, yeah, they're going to turn it around. But their last to go back-to-back defeats against Accrington and Harrogate, this off the back of the 5-2 win at Morecambe, Paul Cook and his team and the fans would look at these 2 games being like, this is our opportunity to really press on, having drawn far too many games. But they'd only lost 2 games all season going into the Accrington game, and they conceded 5 in the 2 of them. They were by no means the worst team here. Just Harrogate were very clinical with their opportunities. Toby Sims with the first goal, with a really nice finish off the back of a free kick from Duke McKenna that hit the woodwork. He was first to the rebound, and with the bouncing ball managed to steer it in the back of the net. James Berry did what, Louis Barry does, but from like 10 yards further, where he seems to get the ball on the left-hand side from like 40 yards and just smack it into the corner. This was so far out that I've never really seen this before. It was like a screamer where a retreating defender ran onto the goal line and tried to head it away.
Yeah, very loopy, wasn't it?
Yeah, which you never really see. And
Fotmob quickly has him on 7 goals from 1.15 XG.
Absolutely ridiculous. Every week I look at him for the goal scorer of the Becking Show, being like, yeah, but he's a big price, but like he's not going to do it again, is he? And he does. But yeah, and I guess from there, Chesterfield fans would have expected them to be the dominant side, but Dean Cornelius scores in the 89th minute in what was, a really good performance from Harrogate, who against the Chesterfield side who have battered quite a few of the poorer teams in the league away from home. They restricted them to very, very little. They let them have it. They took their chances when they came. And that seems to be, for Harrogate at the moment, a source of points against the better side. It's interesting. We spoke about in the League One section about Wrexham, often struggling to implement their game plan away from home against good teams. But for Harrogate, it seems like their defensive shape is so good that they are able to drop off and restrict the opposition from good opposition from creating chances and still carry enough of a threat on the break to put teams away. Results like this are going to be so important to their chances of survival, because I kind of increasingly look at League Two and wonder who the worst teams are, because every time it feels like even the poorest teams do have it in them. And I'm not saying Harrogate are one of those, but you look at Morecambe putting a good performance this weekend. We've seen Accrington quite clearly are now not one of the poorest teams in the league, having been perceived to be earlier on in the season. So it feels like an incredibly competitive League Two this year in my mind. So many teams that could go up and so many teams that could go down.
Yeah, some standout quality from Stephen Duke McKenna for Harrogate here. The free kick, as you mentioned, really great free kick off the post that led to the first goal, and it was him that started the counter-attack with a tremendous bit of skill and ball carrying, which led to the winning goal. Only his 5th start for Harrogate. I was expecting a bit more from him when they signed him in the summer after a good spell with Sutton back end of last season, and with them having lost Ibiodo in particular, hoping that he could be the replacement for that. It hasn't quite happened for him so far, but the quality that he has technically, as he showed multiple times here, I think if he could get in rhythm, maybe the sort of player that, if you take Harrogate for the first 14, 15 games of the season, if McKenna plays like that and starts the next 15 games, the ceiling of their attack is going to be raised massively. What about Aki 2, Swindon 2? Lively start to Ian Holloway's reign in charge of Swindon. Lively game here. Lively interview where he talked about the fact that he thinks the training ground might have a curse on it, and his wife's going to bring some sage to the training ground to help ward off the dark forces that have injured Ollie Clark's Achilles. What about the game at Aki? 2-2.
Can we talk about the curse stuff?
Sure.
I just think, and I know I've always got to be very careful to talk about Swindon due to my allegiance, but it's just, that just can't be what you want to hear. If I supported a team and I had my manager talking about how he wasn't going to go quite as far as Barry Fry, who urinated in all 4 corners of the Birmingham Stadium, but I'm still going to, as if that's crazy.
I'd almost rather he went the whole hog. If you're going to believe in this stuff,
whole hog,
do a wee in the corner of the ground.
But yeah, I love how doing a wee in the corner of the ground is, that's crazy. But getting your wife to come with some sage is like that's not quite as mad. I don't think there was a curse to the Swindon Town training ground. And in fairness, he even says that he doesn't really believe in it. He just wants to give it a go. The game was, I think, for Accrington pretty frustrating. They weren't able to get the win, despite going behind early on. Harry Smith continuing his very good form of being very tall and being able to head the ball in the back of the net from set-piece positions. But from then on, Accrington were by far the better team. And maybe unsurprisingly, both goals coming from set-pieces, with Alafree and Rawson getting 2 goals. Really nice finish from Rawson, who we know is very, very good from set-piece positions. But the goal from Swindon to get back into it from Dan Butterworth was really, really good. A couple of kind of shimmies and feints on driving at goal, and he fired the ball into the bottom right-hand corner from the edge of the area to make it 2-2. And it was actually Swindon who finished the game better and looked like they could be the ones to take all 3 points. But Smith's header was their first shot. Butterworth's strike was their 3rd shot. So for them to have, and in between all of those, there were loads and loads of opportunities for Accrington, of which they took 2. So up until 2-2, Accrington were by far the better side, albeit Swindon did finish strong. It's been an okay start for Ollie, but maybe once he gets the training ground stuff sorted, they're going to fly up the table.
Have you ever been in a situation in your career where you've been working really hard and performing really well individually, but you just feel like your colleagues are not matching your output or your effort or your quality?
Right now.
Oh, you have?
You.
Oh, I've never felt that. I think that's Harry Smith at the moment.
Yeah.
He has scored in 5 straight League Two games.
Mm-hmm.
Swindon's points tally in those games, 2.
Yeah.
2 points. Poor Harry Smith.
But, is he...
He did also miss 3 games after elbowing someone in the face. So it's not all...
That's not okay.
A bit of balance needed there.
Yes, and also I would say he must be quite a big part of Swindon's set-piece defensive unit, and they've conceded twice from set pieces there.
Right. Yeah, he should be winning first contact more than he does from
yeah.
the old defensive set pieces. Loads of draws in League Two, obviously. Colchester and Bradford with a 1-1 draw. Cole used late winner, described by George Elek as we walked to the studio from lunch as some of the worst set-piece defending he'd ever seen.
I think just the worst.
The worst.
Watch it, honestly, if you haven't seen it, and watch it once, and then go back and watch the goal scorer and how I don't think I've ever seen someone be so consistently unmarked from a set piece in my whole life, where he's never, no one's ever looking at him.
Yeah.
Who was it who scored again?
McDonnell.
No one's ever looking at him, and no one is defending the back post zonally. So it means he just basically walks onto the ball and just heads it home in the back post, completely unchallenged. I think Colchester's keeper coming up for that set piece just seemed to completely bamboozle them.
Yeah, I noticed that obviously with the keeper up, that means you've got, in theory, 10 players to mark inside the box, and you've got, in theory, 10 players to mark those 10 players, plus your keeper in goal. So, you've got a man on the front post, and there's arguments for and against men on the post, but obviously with that, you then have one less player to mark than the players that they have attacking the set piece. So to then decide, as it seemed like Jamie Walker, Bradford's number 7, did, that he didn't need to pick anyone up either. Yeah. Set pieces can be a bit of a numbers game, and I'm not sure they'd done the maths there. McDonnell equalising, Andy Cook having smashed Bradford ahead, League Two's top goal scorer. And I thought Colchester should have had a penalty tackle on Lyle Taylor, not given. What else caught my eye? In the extendeds, they cut to Danny Cowley at one point, and he just had both AirPods in during the game on the bench, which I just thought was very Danny Cowley.
What price he's listening to us?
Amazing.
What did Ali say about Bradford again?
Yeah. Someone said they backed us on the betting show. They didn't. That was another week.
Or maybe just because you said so many nice things about Colchester that when Danny's feeling a bit down, he's like, I'm going to listen to that Ali rant again.
Positive affirmations. Yeah. The other thing that stood out was the impact again of Samson Tavide in the second half after he came off the bench. A long ball into the channel was turned into a great chance, all through his own speed and skill, saved by the goalkeeper. He then received a ball back to goal with 2 defenders touch tight, rolled them both and carved out a chance that he dragged wide from the edge of the box. Really just catches my eye basically every time, Tavide. I'd love to see him put together a consistent run of starts and fitness, and I think the output will come. Kouassi, the Salford striker, he caught my eye as well, scoring a brilliant goal for Salford to put them ahead at Doncaster. You see Kylian Kouassi play like this, and you see why managers like him. You see why Blackpool bought him off of Sutton, even when his goal output was never very good for Sutton. You see why Salford got him on loan, even though his goal output for Blackpool wasn't particularly impressive either in the games that he plays, because his size is obvious, and it makes him such a handful physically for defenders, occupying defenders, playing with his back to goal. What he hasn't shown as much is the technique that he showed to rifle the ball in from 20 yards into the far corner. This is someone with only 0.18 goals per 90 in his career so far, which is not great for a striker in terms of goal output, but he's got that set of attributes that I think, even if he never scored a goal again, he's got a set of skills that will be appealing to managers at League 1, League 2 level. I think if he could keep developing as a goal scorer and with his technique, with his ball striking, then things could get really interesting with Kouassi, because he's only 21, he's picking up lots of minutes, he's learning the kind of physical and mental side of the game. And I think some strikers like him can just keep developing, particularly from a goal-scoring point of view, until their late 20s, early 30s as well. So he'll have an interesting career, I think, Kylian Kouassi. They didn't win the game, because Doncaster made some subs. Two of them, Joe Sparrow and Billy Sharp, combined to set up Sharp for the equaliser. Sharp then hit the post. Gibson had done the same for Donny. Another frustrating home game for them. They've only won 1 of their last 6 at the Keepmoat after winning 11 in a row between February and September. It's a funny old game. Salford away from home, also a bit weird. 8 games, 1 win, 1 defeat, 6 draws. Bromley drew 1-1 with Carlisle. Doug Imray, who's one of the premier dribblers in League Two, possibly the best if you look at the stats, playing right wing back for Bromley on loan from Crystal Palace. He teased a diving tackle from Carlisle's fullback Williams. Penalty scored by Michael Cheek. And Bromley were maybe going to see that out, but made it hard for themselves. Their 4th red card of the season, the most in League Two. Lewis Lee with an errant elbow. Carlisle making the most of that with a long throw into the box. 1 less Bromley player there to defend the set piece. It's a numbers game. Adu Ajay firing in for a Carlisle equaliser. And I think it's fair to point out, because I was rude about Carlisle 3, 4, 5 weeks ago. It seems to me they've really realised in the last couple of weeks they're in a big old battle.
Trouble.
And they've rolled their sleeves
well, as
up.
I say, because, other teams like Carlisle would have started the season being like, yeah, we're bad, but look at Morecambe, look at Accrington. And it's becoming very obvious that there's no one you can write off in League Two this season. Yeah,
they're showing more coherence, more quality, and more spirit than a few weeks ago. Still getting almost all of their goals from set pieces, which isn't ideal.
What metric are you using for spirit there?
It's you just see
Fist
it.
pumps.
Yeah, you can just see it. It's an eye test thing.
Yeah, decibels.
Huge spirit. And Bromley, kind of a weird team to cover at the moment because they draw so many games. 7 draws, 3 wins, 5 defeats. 6 of their last 8 have been drawn. It just sums them up quite well, I think. They're just quite good, but not that good. Shoot themselves in the foot sometimes with all these red cards.
Yeah.
Jenkinson early on the other day. The one up at Bradford in the first half of a game as well. This one here.
A lot of late goals in their games, but at both ends, because it was them who scored late against Barrow. It was them who scored relatively late against Cheltenham, but it was them who conceded late against Carlisle.
Bromley. I need to have a think about Bromley. Newport and Grimsby. Grimsby's first draw of the season, a match that happened.
Yeah, a match that happened. Newport shading the chances. It definitely wasn't a 0-0 in terms of chance creation. Both teams missing good opportunities within it. But Grimsby's winning streak on the road is over, but a point away from home is never a bad result, especially given the way the game went. Newport probably ruining missed chances.